Zombie Apocalypse.
What is up, guys? It is Kenniron here. You can probably tell I'm doing this video a little bit differently. Wanted to try this style of video out, see how it does, see if it's easier for me to make, that sort of thing. It's actually kind of difficult to do a scripted video while showing the viewers, that's you guys and girls, I don't discriminate, my face. You don't want it to look like you're straight up reading the script, but you don't want to be searching for your thoughts in the middle of a video. So there's a lot of takes involved. Editing definitely takes a while for me. So I'm trying this out. Hopefully I can relay my message just as well, if not better. And hey, if you guys and girls just want to see my face because you're that infatuated with me, I mean, who wouldn't be? I'll just put a selfie up on the screen. That'll work. So let's get on topic. The amazing review of The Amazing Spider-Man. So Spider-Man 3 didn't do so hot. Big deal, they'll make up for it in the next one, right? Except they won't, because Sony got mad, fired some people, and brought in new people for a completely different universe, timeline, series, or whatever you want to call it. The product, The Amazing Spider-Man. The story focuses more on Peter's parents this time, beginning with them leaving him at Aunt May and Uncle Ben's doorsteps. Well, not literally, but, you know, they bring him inside. They don't just leave him there. They're not heartless. But anyway, years later, he is a troubled high school teen who decides to break in an Oscorp lab, trying to find out the secrets of his father's work. Well, you all know the deal. He's bitten by a spider. But not just any spider, a genetically engineered one. He gains powers, indirectly gets Aunt Ben killed, searches for the killer, works on science stuff for Dr. Connors, aids in the creation of the lizard, gets sidetracked from finding Ben's killer, fights the lizard a few times, gets shot, and fights the lizard a final time. Oh, and he falls in love with Gwen Stacy, who happens to be the police captain's daughter. Also, Captain Stacy dies. That's lovely. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie. It's detailed, it's interesting, it's amazing, pun heavily intended. My biggest problem with the story, though, is Aunt Ben's death seems a little rehashed with less feels, and his killer was never found. Leaving that unresolved didn't do any good for anybody. There could have been a lot of great character development for Peter in a single scene when he's confronted with the killer. The promise was there and yet ignored. Good job, story writers. No, but seriously, good job. Everything else is pretty much golden. Speaking of Peter's character development, let's talk about that for a second. He seems a bit more like a punk, but not necessarily in a bad way. In fact, I felt like I, along with many other moviegoers, could connect and relate with him on a more personal level than in previous movies. He was sarcastic, he was nerdy, he was funny, he had feelings, and he was nervous about getting a girl without all this beating around the bush, sappy romantic stuff that kind of got annoying in the Tobey trilogy. Oh, and just so we're all on the same page, that's what the first three are called now, the Tobey trilogy. My point is, I felt like this was a much more modern and realistic take on Peter as a high school teenager. Uncle May and Aunt Ben felt a bit weaker as characters. Well, Aunt Ben was kind of on par, but there's really no beating the original May. But that doesn't stop them from still being somewhat interesting on screen, and it doesn't really take away from the overall appeal of the movie. Gwen was much, much better than Tobey's Gwen. She had great character, caring for Peter, flipping out at her dad and then blaming her period, and just being an actual person instead of a two-dimensional object. All around, a fun character to watch on screen. Too bad she's dead before the third movie. Oh wait, the entire series is dead before the third movie. Captain Stacy is a bit hard on Peter in my opinion. As a character and as a person it works, I guess, but it just felt like they were driving home his unsettled feelings towards Spider-Man a bit too much. But in the end, he dies as all great heroes do, and makes everything better and worse simultaneously by respecting Peter and then becoming the ultimate cockblock. Dr. Connors, on the other hand, is really neat. Mainly because he's an almost carbon copy of my high school chemistry and physics teacher, minus the arm. Small things like him mentioning how angry he was when Peter's dad left really helped build his character in something of a good and bad guy. The lizard is kind of like an alternate personality, or the bad side, so to speak. I thought it was a neat way to portray him, but I also see it as a bit of a risk that didn't really quite pay off. At the point of this movie's release, the lizard was probably the second worst villain in the Spider-Man movies. The first, of course, being Venom. That's not to say he's a bad character, he's just not up to par with, say, Norman Osborn or Otto Octavius. Another character to bring up is Flash. There's only really one reason he's even worth mentioning, and that's the scene where he apologizes to Parker for Aunt Ben's death. Like I said earlier, those small scenes can help out a whole lot, and this was one of those instances. If it weren't for this scene, Flash would have just been another heartless bully, but now he seems like an alright guy, and I kinda want to forgive him for being a dick earlier. To sum up all of my points on the characters in one thought, it seemed as though the new Spider-Man movie was focusing on characters that were weak in the previous movies, so I give it props for that. On to the character design. I'm only going to talk about Spidey and the Lizard here, as everybody else is just in civilian clothing. Spider-Man looks extremely modernized as he has these cool new web shooters, a super thin spider symbol, and eyes made out of sunglasses lens. Sunglass lenses? Sunglasses lenses? However you say it. Anyway, this modernization felt a little bit over the top in my opinion, but it wasn't so much so that I got turned away from it. All in all, it's not a bad design. The lizard, on the other hand, had a terrible design. I liked the size of the body, the color of the body, and the claws, tail, and feet. What I do not like is his face. They should have kept the snout on him. I understand that in some scenes it might would have taken away from some of his emotion, and they really want to portray that emotion when having it on screen, or having him on screen, excuse me. But you have regular old Dr. Connors for that. They missed a perfect opportunity for a scene with him snarling like an enraged dog. I mean, that was something that I was really excited to see when I heard the lizard was going to be in this movie. But that's only one of two complaints I have about his character design. The second is his nakedness. That sounds kind of weird out of context, but I understand it's supposed to be as realistic as possible, but everyone I know absolutely loved the lizard's coat in the comics and the cartoons. To be sure, they could have found a way to incorporate it into his design in this movie, but instead all they have is that one shot of homage in the school. I think these particular design flaws took me out of the movie a little bit. Also, a lot of his lines sounded like they came straight out of a Venom monologue. Now the action. In this movie, it feels a little lackluster. Peter never does any fancy stuff when he's fighting, and he only has two fights with the lizard, and then the one confrontation in the sewer. The fight at the school was kinda neat, but it wasn't the best. All Peter did was try to incapacitate him with his webs. Even when he fought on top of Oscorp, there was never really any fancy fist fighting or jump kicks or anything like that. For the most part, all Spider-Man did was run away from the hits. It just wasn't fulfilling when compared to stuff like Dr. Octopus train fight. The scenery is something worth mentioning, though. It's pretty on par with the Tobey trilogy, but the two places that stuck out to me were the Oscorp building and the high school. Those places weren't necessarily visited too often before this movie, so it was nice to see them still finding places to go in New York. Some other points I'd like to make about the movie is, for one, the web shooters. Personally, I like the biological web better than the artificial web fluid, but maybe that's just me. Another thing is the physical bruises and scars on Peter. They really show that he can be hurt, and that the lizard can indeed kill him. And my final point is that the scene where Dr. Connors catches Peter when he falls off the side of Oscorp and the scene where the lizard leaves Gwen alone in the closet instead of hurting or killing her. It really shows that Dr. Connors has some level of control within himself, and I really enjoyed that. Alright, I've covered all the points I really want to make, so it's time to rate this thing. Keep in mind that I don't like the lizard's design, I don't like much of the action, and I don't like the unresolved story arc that is Aunt Ben's murder. So I'd say this movie deserves about a 7.9 out of 10. It's a nice, fresh, new take on Spider-Man, but it has certain flaws that I just can't quite get over. It's certainly worthy of being a Spider-Man movie nonetheless. So that's it for this video, guys. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my points. Leave a like, a comment, and all that good stuff, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I hope you enjoyed. Kenniron, out.